the podcast starts.
Hello, dear listener, and welcome to the podcast on which we like to talk about horror. Sometimes we do talk about other things, and sometimes we swear. I am joined by an absolute panoply of a panel today, the full complement of regular hosts on this show, and we'll be talking together about Midnight Mass. My first co-host is the marvellous film lecturer, Kirsty Warrow. Hello, Kirsty.
Hello. Hi, Dan. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
And listener, you just heard a hi there from another wonderful film lecturer, Stella Gaynor, Dr. Stella Gaynor. Hello, Stella.
Hello.
And the final of our foursome is the marvellous writer and critic, Ian Winterton. Hello, Ian.
Hello. How are you doing? Penelope, I can't even say it. Well done. Penelope Pitstop of...
Panelists.
I can't say it.
Are we panelists now?
Well, if this was a convention, I think they'd call us a panel. So,
you did that on your first take.
I know.
That line,
I called it
So impressed.
absolute panoply of a panel. Completely extemporized. So, listener, ages and ages ago, for us, but probably also for you, because we've not recorded for a while, we promised an episode about the marvellous 2021 Netflix series Midnight Mass by Mike Flanagan, and that is what we are finally going to be talking about. It was supposed to come out weeks and weeks ago, and we said it's next week, and it wasn't. Then Easter came round, and I thought, we could do an Easter episode about Midnight Mass because it is set at Easter. But that didn't happen. Now we're recording it. And who knows when you'll be hearing this and if some kind of cataclysm has happened. Hopefully it won't be one which destroys podcasts. Everything else will go, but podcasts will still be all right, and you can hear this.
Quite a specific scenario.
Yeah.
It is.
It is. It is, but this, I was scrolling back through our messages, and this is our fifth attempt at trying to do Midnight Mass.
Okay.
So, and everybody's actually...
Not until it's over, so...
I wasn't involved in any of the previous attempts, so, I've clearly...
You're obviously the lucky charm, Kirsty.
Obviously.
You've broken the curse.
Yes.
You have broken the curse. Well done. Thanks.
Yes, Kirsty, you're the fairy dust. Fantastic.
You've not got
Shall we get on and talk about Midnight Mass? Because I'm sure we'll have lots to say because it's a long and complex...
I couldn't even type it. I kept typing Midnight Ass. I don't know if always do a porn version.
If
there is now.
It's coming.
Hey.
So, a thoroughly Catholic porn movie that will be interesting to say the least.
Well, that's why it's called Midnight Ass, obviously.
Midnight Mass, yeah, that's the old Catholic loophole, isn't it?
Oh my God!
One up the bum, no harm done.
Oh dear!
Yes.
I've never heard that before.
You're the only Catholic amongst us as well.
Yeah,
I was brought up
you?
Catholic, but I turned to Satanism fairly quickly.
Bless you. Well, I'm sure
That conversation, I don't know what that means.
I'm sure we'll have it. Well, yeah, that in the context of that remark, my habitual refrain of "bless you" makes even less sense than usual. But okay, so everybody, we're going to be talking about Midnight Mass now. It's a series which is going to be we're going to spoil from the start. So, dear listener, if you haven't seen this show, go watch it. I'll give you a little précis of the basic setup, but you don't really want to know anything else before going in. It's a series that, for me anyway, a great deal of its delight was in not knowing where it is going. And if you do choose to listen to this podcast before seeing the show, you're going to have loads of things ruined. But I think I can confidently say it's a thorough recommendation for all four of us that you just go and watch this show.
Yeah,
it's on Netflix right now, and it's completely standalone as well. As it is not. I don't think there is any possibility of a second series of Midnight Mass. So it's a finite narrative which again was delightful to me. So, do go check it out. But in case the listener has, hopefully seen the show but not seen it in a while, let's just summarize the premise of the show. So in Midnight Mass, which is an original series written by Mike Flanagan, I think he wrote all of it. He certainly devised the storyline, and he directs every episode, doesn't he? It's a modern-day American setting. It takes place on a small island called Crockett Island, which is a fishing town, essentially. And it's a town which has grown sparse in population as the fishing industry in that area has declined. I think there's some dialogue references to there was an oil spill a few years ago, which kind of wrecked everything. So it's a very kind of quiet, spooky little island, and the introduction character is a character called Riley, played by Zach Gilford. He is from the island. He was born and brought up there. Then he moved away to the mainland, and he was found guilty of death by drunk driving in a horrifying incident which opens the series. And then he goes to prison for 4 years. On release from prison, he returns to Crockett Island to go back to his family. And at the same time as he does that, the island's population, which is heavily Catholic, is kind of shaken by the fact that their priest, who's been the priest there for a very long time, has fallen ill and is replaced by a new priest, played by the actor Hamish Linklater. And this kind of affects everyone. As I say, it's a small community, and the interlockings between all the individuals are quite complex.
I walked across an empty land. I knew the pathway like the back of my hand.
Welcome home, honey, where you belong.
Is this the place we used to love? Is this the place that I've been dreaming of?
I know you struggled with what happened.
With what I did.
Yes, with what you did. But help is here.
A simple thing. Where have you gone?
Good morning. I know I'm not who you expected to see. Just know I'm only here to help, and I look forward to meeting you all.
So tell me when you're gonna let me in.
I'm a pretty rational guy.
Something's happening here.
You're gonna let me in.
We are living in a miraculous time.
You're gonna let me in. You're gonna let me in.
I think I'm crazy. I mean, what's a little crazy between friends, right?
Have you ever been weak? Talk about it somewhere only we know.
Open your minds.
This could be the end of everything.
Open your hearts.
I want you to run.
I am so glad that you'll be with us for what comes next.
I think it's a really character-based show, and it feels really this feels like a real place and a real community. Would anybody like to mention any other characters that they feel are central to it? Because although I say it's a sparsely populated island, it's quite a big cast of characters, and a great deal of the first couple of episodes at least is just getting to know these characters, which is one of the wonderful things about it.
I mean, I think one of the great things about it is all the characters are really well drawn and really, well, likable is a horrible word for screenwriting, but they're all compelling to watch. Like Bev Keane is a brilliant character.
Yeah.
She's really not very likable, but
Yes.
She's a brilliant character.
Well, she's kind of hateable, but at the same time very watchable. That actress, by the way, Samantha Sloyan, is the daughter of an actor called James Sloyan, who always used to turn up in the 80s and 90s playing slightly creepy characters in the X-Files and the various Star Treks and things. And he's obviously passed his talent on.
What a creepy family.
She is fantastic in this show.
Yeah,
absolutely.
She's
great.
But weirdly, she doesn't jump out as well. She is great, but she's the most. We'll talk about the Stephen King thing, but she's a sort of classic Stephen King character.
Yeah, she's archetypal, isn't she? Because she's very strong in her faith, and she's
the woman in the mist.
Yeah, she's Mrs. Carmody. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
she's a kind of judgmental religious person.
Yeah. So I'd say I really like Joe Colley, just as a sort of quietly the drunk Joe Colley.
Oh yeah.
Just as a quietly brilliant acting turn and character. And the sheriff is great.
Yeah, he is fantastic. Yeah. I mean, everybody is fantastic, but he is really great.
He's particularly good.
Cooley.
I do have a soft spot for
Yeah.
Right. Well, who can blame you?
Yeah. Well, in similar terms, Erin Green, played by Mike Flanagan's wife, Kate Siegel. She's I've got a soft spot for her.
I should say this is the third Mike Flanagan joint we've done on the podcast, isn't it? After The Haunting of Hill House and then Doctor Sleep, and his favourite actors are kind of apparent. Obviously, Kate Siegel is, not just his favourite actor, but his favourite person. And she's in The Haunting of Hill House. Then you've got Alex Esso, who's in Doctor Sleep, and Henry Thomas, who's in all three things. He plays Riley's father.
Yeah. We were just saying off mic how I managed to get through. It wasn't until the rewatch I realised it was Elliot from E.T. again. And even though I knew he was in Mike Flanagan films, I still managed to be fooled because his performance, he just disappears into his characters. Absolutely brilliant. So I didn't realise during Bly Manor that it was him either.
Really?
No.
Yeah, so I kind of have the opposite response to him is that I'm just so aware that it's him. In fact, the only time in a Mike Flanagan joint that I kind of went, oh, that's interesting, it's him, is when he was in Doctor Sleep. When he was
playing Jack Nicholson.
Yeah. That was, for a moment, I kind of lost him and just saw Jack Nicholson. But I think I didn't find him that compelling in Bly Manor because
was he doing an English accent in that? I still haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Not brilliant. Yeah. But yeah. But I liked him in this though. I liked him in Hill House a lot, and I liked him here as well. It's nice, sort of, particularly because of obviously the whole Elliot E.T. thing. Sort of seeing him really, kind of commit to sort of more fatherly, kind of mature, older roles.
Yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
I've got face blindness, but just for Henry Thomas.
Maybe you have.
Maybe.
So spectacularly, and every single time, like I didn't realise till somebody told me that he was in Hill House.
Yeah.
It's always unexpected. But unless I'm mad, but isn't he particularly sort of brilliantly disappeared into his character in this as Riley's dad? Did you just go, "Oh, that's Elliot off E.T."
Well, that's what I did the same with Hill House. It's just, that's Henry Thomas, but
Yeah. Oh, but anyway.
That's okay. You clearly have blindness around Henry Thomas, and that's okay. So.
I mean, as someone who didn't see E.T. for the first time until last year, it's just not burned on my consciousness. I've just avoided it my whole life. Probably because when I was very young, they had the Marks and Spencer picture book of E.T. in my school library, and I read it, and didn't particularly love it. So I've just never thought, oh, go and watch that story that I already know I don't like. So,
Okay.
but
I hope you realise that you've been missing out all these years.
Yeah.
Not really.
That's a side. We mustn't get right. We're going to beat you up about that later.
Yeah. It's a good job that we're not all in the same space, Dan, as well.
Yeah.
But
Clearly.
Ian can hold it down. I'll just pummel you.
But where I was going with that was that, I see Henry Thomas and I like his presence. I don't instantly think Elliot from. I actually am more likely to think young Norman Bates because he played young Norman in Psycho 4. And obviously, when most people have, in recent years think young Norman Bates, they probably think Freddie Highmore. But I never saw that show, so it's always Henry Thomas to me. And he's very good in that. I've never seen him not be great.
I might have seen E.T., but I've never seen Psycho 4.
Well, there we go. Ian.
That's okay.
Yeah.
The equivalent.
Okay. Somebody else I think is worth mentioning is obviously and also part of the Mike Flanagan rep company is Annabeth Gish. She plays the town doctor in Midnight Mass. She's a fascinating character. She's also in Hill House. And I've recently watched The West Wing, as I keep mentioning on this podcast, in which she's a semi-regular character, and she's a really interesting screen presence. She was also, of course, the lead in The X-Files for a bit after Gillian Anderson and David Duchovny left. Mm-hmm. And she's just got a fascinating face. I just found myself really invested in all of these characters, and I really enjoyed not knowing where it was going and thinking, is this going to devolve into horror schlock at some point? And it never really does. But the main character that we've not really mentioned, who kind of is the first point of intrigue in the story, really, is the priest, played by Hamish Linklater. Who is Father Paul, and I don't know about you guys. I don't know Hamish Linklater's work at all. I believe that he's a sitcom actor. Kirsty, you look like...
Never heard of him previously.
Yeah. No, I was familiar with him from he was in Legion, which is kind of X-Men type thing, and he was amazing in that. So, kind of very different character because it's a very different show. But I think in the first episode when it was like, oh, it's that guy. And then, kind of, I think for me, whilst Legion is spectacular and it's, kind of really broad and bonkers, it's about so much other, more than just, kind of his character, who is, supporting rather than kind of a lead. So it's lovely just to sort of see him and this sort of quiet control that he has. That he does very little. I think actually, or at least the performance seems really restrained, and it ends up sort of speaking volumes. And you can absolutely sort of see, I think, that the kind of way that the town would be, or the community would be, sort of seduced by his calm, quiet, kind of way of engaging with them rather than being kind of evangelical and bombastic. He seems like a very kind presence.
Yeah, I mean, I feel it's an easy comment to make, and I've already kind of said it about other characters, but the kind of realism of him, he really felt like an earnest religious figure moving into a new community and kind of trying to reach out to people who don't know him and trying to build a relationship with them. And it just made me feel like I was there, really, even though all the characters have got the attachment of the previous priest, which I didn't have as a viewer, because you don't see him except in flashbacks later. That kind of the tangibility of that tentative reaching out was really compelling, I thought, and he just does a beautiful job. And not having any knowledge of the actor before, I just kind of felt like, more than anyone, he just felt like, it's like they've got a real priest to just walk in there.
Yeah.
You know, he's incredible. And, you know, we're in spoilers now, so obviously, last chance, listeners. I don't think we spoiled anything major, but we're going to now. Obviously, as the show goes along, we discover he's not the new priest; he's the old priest, regenerated, and that is just fascinating. The way that it kind of recontextualizes everything that we've seen. So, you know, there's that wonderful scene where he's looking at Annabeth Gish's character, who is Dr. Sarah Gunning, who's gay, and he's just kind of gazing at her, and she thinks he's kind of doing the priest thing of, you know, trying to work out how do I connect with this sort of, I guess, atheistic sort of sexual deviant person or whatever. But actually, we found out later on that that's not at all why he obviously knows her. Because she's his daughter, and he's kind of looking at her through new eyes, and these kind of the way it layers in these. I could describe them as plot twists, but they're so gradual that to call them twists it is not really accurate. They're more like very gentle curves as you gently learn more and more things.
At no point is there, I don't think anyway, any like moment. It's more like all the way through. Right, it's that. And I think the biggest moment is when, I'm not sure which episode it is, I've not noted it down, but there's the slow pan into the newspaper article on the wall in Father Paul's little priest hut thing, wherever he lives, and we can see that it's him. And I think that's the only one that really makes you go, oh. Everything else is just this very slow, really beautifully paced reveal throughout the whole thing. So speaking of the reveals and the pacing of it, so you said that like the first couple of episodes we are just getting to know people, and I think we are generally, but for me my favourite episode is episode 6, which is titled The New Covenant. So I am jumping ahead a little bit, but just because I'm too excited to talk about it. You all know that I'm obsessed with cults, particularly death cults, and any people who might want to get together and commit a ritual mass suicide or mass murder, let's call it what it is. And within that episode, they all come together, they're all going to poison themselves so they can all be rejuvenated, and it's just like Jonestown. It's just like Jim Jones standing there saying, take the poison, you know. There's a couple of lines that Father Paul says that are almost word perfect from the death tape from Jonestown, saying things like die with dignity, don't let your children suffer, stuff like that, all the things that Jones said. So when I was watching that episode, one of those episodes or those bits in films or whatever where you're at home and you are watching it alone because your husband has no interest in these things, and I'm just standing there and I was stood up in my living room, threw off the blanket that I always have on the sofa, and I stood up going, it's Jonestown, it's Jonestown, they're doing Jonestown. And I was ridiculously, horribly excited for something on TV, or Netflix, it's TV, isn't it, or who cares, to sort of tackle this. I mean, you said Father Paul's not evangelical, but Beverly certainly is, and she twists it, so she twists his words so much, and everybody else, or a good portion of the community inside that church that evening, they turn evangelical and they turn to this blind faith of you're going to commit suicide and it's going to be fine. But of course the difference is the example that he gives. Who's the guy who does the example? I can't remember. One of them guys drinks the poison and he survives and he rejuvenates, and everybody rushes forward, you know, to have a go and drink the drink, and then it all just escalates into some are rejuvenated and some then become food. But I loved that episode so much. That it's
it's amazing.
That Flanagan, has talked about Jonestown in connection with this. It was always in their head. It was all going to go there. So part of the thing we should talk about is Flanagan, how long Flanagan's had this idea. How long there's a brilliant interview on Collider where he's just talking, and he just says he's had this idea for like 20 odd years in his head, and he's pitched it twice as a TV show. He's written it as a novel, and so it's always had Jonestown in it, and it's always opened in exactly the same way, with the fish on the back of the Christian fish on the back of the car. But also the fact that his biggest fear, because he was an alcoholic, his biggest fear was killing someone when he was under the influence. And it all comes out of that fear. And the interview is brilliant because one of the things he talks about is how he pitched it while he was still a drunk. And he's kind of glad it got rejected because actually he has a full understanding now because he's been sober for 4 years when he wrote it, 3 or 4 years when he finally got the thing off Netflix. So it's like so that all that it's a very personal piece. So he is sort of Riley, and so he'd always had this story brewing in his head and had tried to write it over and over again. But the beginning had never changed, and the Jonestown bit had never changed. So they were the sort of two bits that were absolutely always there. It was always heading to Jonestown, and it was always starting with, with a guy going to prison because he's a drunk. The 12 steps, and faith. It's one of the things about that I love so much about Midnight Mass, even before you get to the amazing acting and all the rest, is just the structure, just the storytelling on a basic level. It's just masterful in that it pulls off so many. I don't want to call them tricks because that's cheapening them, but it pulls off just like we don't really want to call them twists, do we? Because they're a bit cheap. But the storytelling is so good that it's just a perfect example of how Riley is technically, in old-fashioned terms, he's the protagonist. He's brilliant at how much it brings you into this ensemble, and you never go, oh, what's happening? I'm following too many people. It's perfect. And then, here's another big spoiler, but hopefully everyone stops listening now if they really haven't watched it.
It's a free for all now.
But when Riley burns himself in the boat, that is just as someone who's a writer, the fact when I see people so masterful that they break the rules and it makes it better, not worse. To kill the person that we went in thinking, oh, this is this, and we didn't like lose it for a second. We didn't go what? Not even, we didn't
think, oh, I'm not watching it now. He's dead.
But not even.
I don't know.
Like just a bit of a spoiler for No Country for Old Men, but there's that bit at the end of the second act of No Country for Old Men, which I remember people walking out of the cinema because they felt so shortchanged. I watched that, even though, again, I'd say that was an example of how masterful people who know structure, but that really annoyed a lot of people. Whereas this, I don't think did, because he's built this little mesh of characters around the central character that sort of passing on the torch to, so to speak, what's her name?
Isn't it?
So making it clear that it's up to her now, and it's also a big shock. It's absolutely brilliant.
It is, and it's also at the start of the thing. Riley first, and you're following Riley, but by 4 episodes in or whatever it is, you know so many of the characters in depth, kind of removing one of them. Even the one who is ostensibly the lead at the start, you've still got loads of other characters you're completely invested in, and it is done with incredible confidence.
It's at the end of episode 5 when Riley dies. Yeah. So we've got 2 episodes where the fight is about
2.
our protagonist, which is just brilliant.
Mm.
You know,
The end of that. So when Riley dies, and he goes up in flames, and he sees the girl that he killed in his car. As that episode comes to a close, we've got Erin screaming, obviously, because she's watching Riley on fire in front of her, and her screams go over the credits. So on all the other episodes, we get a hymn over the credits, and that would point me to then, because the other thing that I've written down in capital letters and underlined is the sound design across the whole of the series. So Erin screaming over the credits at the end, when we are doing the Jonestown bit in the church, when the vampire things have kind of come back around and they're preying on everyone, there's a subtle heartbeat running through the sound. So in amongst all the screaming, you can just hear a heart thumping. And it's just the constant use of the music, Dan, with our Catholic upbringing, loads of the hymns I know, I remember them and knew them, couldn't help but sing along. And every single episode has got just a moment of beautiful, incredible sound layering and sound mixing in it that, like I said before, my husband's not really bothered about any of this. I mean, he's not really a horror fan. But when I was watching Midnight Mass, I watched it over a couple of days, he kept sort of, because I'll be watching TV, he'll be watching something on his laptop with his headphones on, and he kept taking his headphones off and listening to it, and sort of then going back into whatever he was doing, because he kept hearing something and being like, what is that? Even as someone who's not watching it and not listening to it, it kept cutting through whatever the rugby, that's what he was watching. No, but he has said from the bits that he sort of took his headphones off to go, well, what is this? And he wasn't looking at the screen, it's just what he could hear. And he was like, oh yeah, I might actually watch that. That looks okay. But just the sound is stunning.
As you know, my wife Kelly, our Venn diagram does not overlap with horror at all, because she's too scared by it. But I said, you've got to watch this. It's brilliant. It's about religion. She's not that religious, but she did dabble with Catholicism and stuff, so she's always interested. And it was brilliant rewatching it with her, because she was terrified, but it never quite pushed her over the edge. Like, it
was never too much.
Yeah, and she absolutely loved it. Absolutely,
she loved it.
It was terrifying, but the whole way it was, just everything about it was so gripping that we binged it in like a couple of days, I think. And it's brilliant. It's always good, get someone who's actually really scared of horror films to actually sit down and watch one is always good fun, isn't it? And
Especially if it's 7 hours long, that's quite an impressive achievement.
Yeah. Well, I think in terms of horror, it's weird because it's creepy. She couldn't watch Hill House, even though she could appreciate it was good. It was too scary. She couldn't make it through that because it was going to give her nightmares. But this,
it is.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And this, I mean, I guess unless you're 13 years old, you're not really bothered about watching things because they're scary or they've got lots of blood in them or whatever. But this was creepy, but was more a really good drama that had horror elements in it, wasn't it? Because and I say horror elements, and maybe we're just getting used to it, but the whole episode 6 was full on.
Well, when I watched episode 6, I had misunderstood. I thought it was a 6-part series, so I thought this was the climactic episode.
Oh, that was it,
and it felt like that. And then when it went off, and I thought the story's clearly not over, it's like, oh, okay, there's another episode. Fine.
I've taken to really checking how many episodes are in things now, because this new world we're in, we're still used to 6 or 8 and it being an even number, and actually the amount of times they're not anymore. So you really have to, because I like to know if I'm watching the last episode.
Yeah, me too. I need to know, because otherwise you're like,
or if you go, what's this last episode? Oh shit.
What am I going to do now? All right, probably go to bed.
Certain ways of wanting to approach the last episode, aren't there? If you're into something. But
with chocolate and a drink of something pleasant. That's my way. Put the feet up.
But I mean, that episode 6 was just. I mean, it really is apocalyptic. There's no other way around it, isn't it? And I just kept going, oh my god, they're going there. They're literally killing everybody. This is brilliant. They're doing it. They're literally killing everybody.
that tone continues into the last episode. You know, they literally burn down every building on the island, don't they?
There's nothing left.
Yeah.
It's incredible. But, you know, that speaks to the fear I have that, this is going to turn into schlock at some point. And it never does. Although what happens kind of could be. But just the way it's written and performed, you know, it maintains the kind of humanity of it. And the, what's the word, the kind of composure of it. Straight to the end.
Well, it's got, I mean, obviously it's got, we've mentioned Stephen King already, but obviously it's Salem's Lot is very much in its DNA in terms of the vampire element, and the vampire element in a sort of done in a sort of naturalistic way.
Yes.
And it's got, so it's got that sort of element to it. It's a monster. It's not even like a vampire that doesn't look like a monster, but it still somehow is naturalistic, isn't it? I love the design of the creature. The angel as they call it.
Brilliant
it's an angel,
creature.
yeah.
Let's talk about that for a minute then. In a way, I have questions about that. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was both frightening, you know, as a vampire monster, and credible as an angel figure. And the way Father Paul kind of describes it as an angel and talks about how everybody who meets an angel is terrified. And, you know, that did chime with me and made me ask the question, is this series saying that angels were always real, but they were always vampires? So, therefore, you know, is it just, is it turning that on its head?
I don't think it ever says anything so clear anyway about religion or life up there for anything. I think it's more clever than that. But I think it's just sort of saying people are so sure about their beliefs that what they think, that, you know, he believes in angels. He sees something that so obviously to us isn't an angel, that he still sees an angel. He's reason, I mean, this is the conceited thing. Somehow he's not heard of vampires, like us haven't. He somehow hasn't worked out. It's a fucking vampire.
That's a convention in vampire stories, isn't it? But often you have to set them in a universe where vampires aren't a pop cultural thing.
And obviously,
zombies too.
Yeah, and I can forgive that. But it's also it's brilliantly done that he just sees everything as good. He sees everything as God speaking to him. And I mean, in a way, I don't think anyone who's religious would find this an anti-religious film.
I don't think so.
Series. Because I think one of the things the Bible's always going on about is beware false prophets and all the rest of it. You know, so this thing has seduced him like Satan seduces people in the Bible. So, you know,
I would just
seduces people in the Garden of Eden. So it's but just in a sort of horror term, I just love the design, the way it's a sort of, it feels like an ancient thing that has been under the desert for 3,000 years or whatever.
And it's fantastic that it remains unknowable, but also tangible and defeatable. You know, it's clearly very difficult to kill, but at the end, when
they don't kill it.
Yeah, but when its wings have been, you know, kind of lacerated at the end, and the kid observes, you know, he won't be able to fly very far with those wings, and that seems like a very credible observation. You know, it's not an invulnerable creature, but at the same time, you know, you can't. They're not going to be able to kill it, but they might be able to slow it so it can't get away from the sun, kind of thing. And you don't even see that either. You're kind of left to infer that that's what happens to it. It is kind of great. But the creature is the site of the one thing which I thought was maybe a flaw. I'd like to know what you all think, because the creature obviously never speaks, and the ambiguity of it kind of serves the narrative. But at points I thought, is it ambiguous in a kind of contradictory way? Like, it seems to be deliberately like you said, Ian, seducing him with what he wants to see. So, like when it appears in church and he's wearing the surplice and kind of behaving like an angel. But at other points, it does things like when it's drinking blood, it seems he hardly even aware that there are any other people around, and they can kind of shoot at it, and it hardly notices. So, is it a mindless creature, or is it, a calculating creature?
Well, what I've got in this interview with Flanagan is that one of the things they do is it never says any of its own lines. So in a way, it's not seducing them. It only mimics, and that was very deliberate. So it only mimics what other people do. So it's I love the idea that this thing wouldn't even have anything new to say to anyone, and all it could really do was regurgitate what they already had, which makes it even sadder for Father Paul and Bev. So it's literally that. It's basically just going, I'm just saying stuff back to you, and their own prejudices, their own preconceptions, their own beliefs are all it needs, which is, which, I mean, I couldn't help thinking, and he never mentions this, but I couldn't help thinking the fact that this was made during a time when, more than half of the United States had been seduced by Donald Trump.
Right.
So, so to me, he just says nonsense and says nonsense back to them, and they all believe what they want to believe. They explain away the stuff they don't. They hand wave everything that doesn't really make sense, and they just put stuff onto him that is nothing to do with him, and he doesn't even say it himself. When it's the QAnon stuff, he's not really heard of it, kind of thing. Or he has now, but he's very much. He wasn't like actively going, right, I'm going to do QAnon and I'm going to get everyone to believe this and I'm going to get everyone to believe that. He literally was just a blank sheet of paper that everyone wrote their own dark dreams onto. And this is a sort of similar idea. And as a sort of, so it's not criticizing religion, but I think it's criticizing, it's criticizing, or it's making us aware that our firmly held beliefs can take us to dark places.
I think that's fair enough. Yeah, I mean, that sounds interesting. I mean, I think this series definitely invites rewatching. I know some of you've seen it twice anyway. I'd certainly watch it again, and I'd kind of be looking out for those things. And maybe there are things that I missed that kind of smooth those questions out anyway. But it was just
I hadn't really realised about the mimicking thing till I read this thing. Because if you actually then you go back and look at it and you go, oh yeah, he just says when one of the minor characters goes in and sort of sees him in that abandoned house, and he just says it back to him.
Right.
So it's almost like almost like an animal. It just appears. Humans tend to go, oh cool, I'll believe you are what I want to believe, and so I don't think it's actually actively done very much to get taken to its food source.
Right.
I think it's just sort of gone along with what the priest has done, and the priest has packed him in a box and taken him to an island full of food.
Right.
Well, we all get
yeah. But another thing was it was always that one of the things was it was always that it shouldn't die, because that threat is always present in wherever there are humans. Like you said, it's going to land somewhere. And the whole thing will probably start up again, kind of thing. Which I don't think it means there's going to be a sequel, because we've done it. Lord of its themes. But that was just the whole not killing it, but really damaging it is, like whether it's fascism or religious fundamentalism or whatever you happen to not be against, that evil always never quite goes away, because that's what humans are. So that's how I saw it. That thing flapping away, injured but not dead. Is you could sort of lay that analogy as an analogy over many things, whether that's we defeated fascism in World War II, and and then it's still there as a little rot. It's still present, and it could still take over again. But that's just because I was, I'm personally preoccupied with that side of things.
That was on your mind, Ian.
Yeah. Especially when it was, this was done during COVID when Trump was in power. The actual unthinkable had happened. I think it's on my mind again because I just listened to a brilliant interview with Hillary Clinton, and I've just had the full horror of the fact that man won back in my head. Not horror adjacent technically, although Trump is obviously horror adjacent.
Dystopia.
I'd recommend listening to the podcast with Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart interviewing Hillary Clinton.
Oh, and the rest is politics. Okay, I must have missed that.
When it's not the rest is politics, it's their offshoot called Leaders, which is out on a Monday. But you should go and find that on your podcast provider.
Well, we will put a link in the show notes. I want to just mention now, seeing as Stella had a moment to revel in her personal connection with this, I should talk about how it spoke to my Catholicism. So for a start, I've been to quite a lot of midnight masses in my life, but I did not go to one this year on Christmas Day. Instead, I went home and I watched midnight mass on TV at midnight.
That's the same.
Which might have been unproductive. And then it turned out I was almost disappointed that actually the series has nothing to do with Christmas, because midnight masses are always Christmas as far as I'm concerned.
Christmas,
but
isn't it?
But for necessary reasons in the plot, we have a midnight mass happening at Easter time in the series, so that does all make sense. Back in the day when I had more religious faith than I do now, Easter used to be my favourite time of year because of the sun, and because you, as a Catholic, you go to church nearly every day, and the sense of community and things. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite. I'm no longer in that place. But this series, even through its portrayal of Catholicism, it kind of touched on my personal journey in a really nice way. I loved the details. I mean, as Ian said, it's clearly very personal for Flanagan, and I think he's clearly using details from his own life in terms of the religiosity, and I really appreciated things like the references to the previous translation of the Bible. Henry Thomas's character says to Father Paul, "Oh, thank you for using the previous translation. We hadn't heard that for years." And funnily enough, the timing of the previous translation, which came in 2011, was kind of when my faith started wobbling. And I was already not really getting what I used to do out of being a Roman Catholic. And then suddenly they changed all the scripture in a really annoying way. They changed like every line by about 3 words. So if you'd learned it all your life and been saying it, you suddenly couldn't join in. It was really irritating.
I've found that with my son goes to a Christian school, C of E school, and I was brought up Methodist. I wasn't. I was packed off to Methodist Sunday school so my parents could shag on a Sunday, as we've had the conversation since. So they weren't religious, but they packed me off for the free childcare.
Right.
And gave me a good inoculation of religion, because I remember just going, "It's bollocks, this, isn't it?" But anyway, but in the same way, I've had Our Father who art in heaven and all that. The Lord's Prayer, I've said it over and over again in my life, and then they say it in a weird, different way without the these and thous and stuff.
Yeah,
it's horrible. I'm there in church. I'm there in church, first time in ages, and I can't even do the bloody Lord's Prayer anymore.
Yeah, but I only just realised today when thinking about it, even that point is a really nice piece of writing, because what is Father Paul's real age? He looks like a young man, but he's in his 80s or his 90s. And when he's younger, he starts reverting to what he used to say in church 10, 15 years ago. You know, when his mind was fresher. So it's just like it's a really subtle first hint. Whereas they play it as like, oh, I just thought I'd use the old translation because for larks or whatever.
Nice.
But,
Do you find that you're same with me as well? Because you know, it's Catholic upbringing. You know, there's lots of things in it that are recognisable.
Oh yeah.
That didn't necessarily make it scary because it's, you know, I think it's emotional and moving and lots of other things aside from scary. There was just lots of it that I was like, oh yeah, I remember that, and loads of things that sort of chimed well with me because of experience of going to lots and lots of Catholic masses. So when they tell Father Pruitt's story through the medium of the wooden carvings of signs of the cross that you have in most churches, and they tell this story through that, I was like, that's the Stations of the Cross, that's it. I was like, oh yeah, that's quite nice, you know, because it's just and I wonder if you'd never, you know, got friends who had not brought up with any religious thing, never been to church apart from maybe when somebody's died, you know, they wouldn't recognise using those carvings as a way of telling story that you did every year. You went to church, didn't you, and went round and did the Stations of the Cross.
Yes, I didn't.
It's interesting to see that.
I didn't realise that
when you used to do it.
But it's still effective, even if you, because I didn't have knowledge till you.
Yeah,
just
it still
said.
works. It's still beautiful.
But So there's so many different layers. I mean,
it's
it is
like,
it is a really,
really
dense piece of work, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
Kirsty, what's your favourite bit? I need to know.
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, it's I mean, I thought the one scene that sticks out for me is the scene with the priest and Riley when they're in the church together alone, and I think it's the first time in the show that I sort of consciously kind of recognize the sort of dialogue-ness of it, the sort of, you know, the theatrical, you know, so often the film is, so often the TV show is, you know, one person monologuing, and that becomes a sort of distinctive feature about it, which, you know, for television often seems, you know, quite brave, particularly in the sort of contemporary setting where we're all like, oh, look at how cinematic TV is now, like it's not, you know. So just that kind of you know, that the confidence that Flanagan has of going, no, I'm just gonna, you know, I'm really gonna anchor this in, you know, I think it's a really distinctive and effective device for allowing us to get to know all these characters, is that so many of them have these, you know, prolonged sort of features where they're not moving around in a big theatrical way. It's just, you know, they're very sort of just, you know, still and talking about it. So Riley's last scene kind of goes into that, isn't it? He's, you know, sort of reflecting on what he's going to do. And, you know, I was going to call her Nell, not Nell. Erin gets the same, you know, kind of thing. So that. And also, I think the other, it's not a moment, but the whole, like, the sheriff's sort of journey, I thought was really good and interesting in the fact that, you know, that
scene
because obviously
where he describes his motivation is fantastic. Sorry to interject, Kirsty. Please continue.
No, I just really like the kind of, and I mean, I know that it'll probably been criticised for being too woke, but I liked having the kind of Muslim character on the outside of the community, as you know, you would expect. But I also like the fact that, you know, you could sort of see him as an outsider watching and seeing what was coming, and sort of, you know, the inevitability of the kind of indoctrination, the destruction of the community, and being powerless. It was really heartbreaking, particularly obviously the relationship with his son.
In the church when the son runs forward, doesn't he? He's like, I'll drink it, and then that's when he pulls his gun out.
No, it's really horrible. But you were talking before about the kind of, you know, the kind of angels and vampires and stuff, and one of the things I was thinking, but you're all so deep in it. There's you know, and when he was sort of talking about Trump as well, is that you know, for what it sort of speaks to me about is, you know, there's some bit of theory, and I forget who the scholar was who talked about this, but that, you know, kind of vampire narratives are often popular in ages where there's sort of, financial instability. There's sort of metaphor for, the kind of 1% draining us.
Yeah.
And I was watching it. It was interesting because there's a Netflix series, but I think it's called Trial by Media, which is a true crime, but focused on the.
It's great.
But there was the episode I was watching yesterday was about, kind of how a really rich person kind of, as part of their defense was the fact that they'd suddenly become kind of evangelical and become part of the kind of Christian community. And that sort of idea of, kind of the vampires as being kind of Trump-like characters. No, they're not like that, but, sort of, using the rhetoric of faith in order to, kind of, essentially kind of get people to sign up for their own demise, which, kind of politically is, and socially.
It's that blind faith, isn't it? That you just follow no matter what. And, look, the storming of the Capitol building, it was like, if any of you guys actually stop to think about what you're doing, or you're just charging up those steps, it's like very blinkered vision.
And obviously, is it, I want to say Bev, but it's not Bev, is it? What's the character name of the kind of the zealous woman?
Bev.
That is Bev.
It is Bev.
That's Bev.
Bev. I just thought
it is our Bev.
Yeah. So it just seemed like such a northern name that it could possibly
Yeah, which I appreciated as well.
Bev. She's got a fag on all the time.
But and it's, for me, kind of the angel vampire is one thing, and the kind of the priest who is, kind of being rejuvenated is another thing. But she's the fucking scariest. It's that.
Yeah, she's terrifying.
Yeah,
because she's real.
Yeah.
She's one of my favorite. One of my, I mean, I love it all, but one of my favorite moments is her ending.
Yeah.
Just.
Oh, when she's scrabbling in the sand, and it's like, and now when you're up against it, now you're frightened.
She's the one who doesn't.
Mad old bag.
She's the one who doesn't actually have proper faith. It was all performative.
No.
Yeah, at the end she loses it, because if you really believed, you old bitch, then you'd be off to heven, right? But no, you're scrabbling around in the sand.
Yeah.
Even people who believe in heaven don't want to go there early.
No.
No.
Wow, that's a telling quote. Blimey.
Yeah, hot take.
You should write that down. Wow.
No, I can't remember who said it, but it was somebody. It's not
right.
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
Somebody said it with those with those monologues. It was with Hill House that I was looking at interviews with Mike Flanagan about letting the actors do their monologue, and I'm pretty sure I mentioned it when we did our episode on Hill House, and Flanagan said something like, and it's also in my book, in an interview when people were asking him about the monologues and his reason for that, and he said, well, I just really like the idea of letting actors act and not doing, like Kirsty said, having all of the bells and whistles going on around them, because there's scenes where that's happening, there's incredible acting and all of the bells and whistles and the beautiful stuff that's going on. But sometimes when you've just got a person in a room with another person, and I think in Hill House there's the one where their groundskeeper, he tells the story of why his mother or wife or whatever can't go in the house anymore, and the camera just does a slow pan pull in on him through the whole monologue, and you occasionally hear Crane behind the camera going like encouraging him to keep talking, and the same thing's happening throughout this. And you also have, Flanagan loves a long continuous tracking shot, doesn't he? Yeah. So we have it on the beach in episode 1 with the dead cats, and we have people walking up and down the beach, and there's various conversations, and people are coming in and out of conversations with other actors, and there's no cuts, just like we have in the Two Storms episode of Hill House. And it's, signature, it's things that he likes to do, but they're just so, like I said, they're so restrained and so composed. And it is a brave move. It is a bold move for TV. And it's why it works on Netflix. It's not going to be on somewhere with adverts, because you can't chop that up. And it's just amazing.
I had a few. I think it's brilliant. But I had a few writer friends who just automatically went, "Oh God, the self-indulgence of having a really long." And it's like,
I saw that across social media, and it's like, no, it's lovely. Let them breathe.
Yeah. And I thought it was brilliant and bold. I mean, the bit I sort of liked anyway, but then reading about it, the way they filmed the AA scenes, that was, they literally found a way to just, they might not have been shown as one continuous shot, but they filmed them as a piece of theatre. They made so the actors just kept going for hours, for a long time, doing these scenes without a break. and so, and they found a way to sort of shoot almost in the old TV style, so the cameras weren't in shot. The actors didn't have to stop. They just did the whole scene from beginning to end. And that really comes across. That I mean, man, he knows what he's doing, doesn't he? to really does. But yeah, just I mean, you can see why actors love him.
Oh yeah,
they get to do. You know, they don't just go, oh, here's a bunch of scenes and each one's like 4 lines long and then cut, which obviously is a perfectly valid way to write, but his way of writing is, I mean, we're back to Stephen King again, but he's novelistic. He's like, it's like he's adapted a book that doesn't exist, although from what it probably does exist in some manuscript form. But
it's funny, I spent the first sort of 20 minutes of the first episode going, is this a Stephen King adaptation?
Yeah.
That I'm not aware of, because he just it has, you know, you're talking about the kind of aesthetics of it and the kind of, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean,
but just the whole thing just feels very like from the pages.
It's almost folk horror as well in the sense that folk horror is about small communities and religion.
Then
it's kind of folk horror, and it deliberately has, you know, all the characters are seen through the prism of belief, whether they're Muslim, atheist, or Catholic or whatever. But it's weird for me because you know, I've adapted Ramsey Campbell's Hungry Moon, which was I got that book when I was 12, and it's got a quote from someone called Stephen King on the back, which is how I started reading Stephen King after reading Ramsey Campbell, because Stephen King loves Ramsey Campbell. Liverpool based, now in his 70s, but it's weird because that is all about those. Mike Flanagan's just the latest in a series of this sort of thing and he's brilliant at it, but Stephen King has it. This book, The Hungry Moon, is I made the switch to make it set around a Catholic community because it's in the Peak District, which is very Catholic, weirdly. There's lots of Catholic communities in the Peak District, so I made that change, and I wrote it before Midnight Massacre came out. But the similarities, it's basically a demon coming down, and the evangelical Christians that come over from America that start taking over the thing have actually been infected by the demon. And it's weird how Dan's in it, in fact. So it's weird how
I wasn't saying that.
So Dan's in it, in fact. So it's weird how it's very much a sort of tradition that he's part of. This tradition, and like we said, we've got Carrie's mum, we've got the woman in.
Oh God, Carrie's mum and Bev, get them two.
Well, I'm just saying it's
wow.
And there's a very similar character in Hungry Moon, which. We've got Louise Jameson off of Doctor Who playing. But I've actually softened her, and I've softened her because I was kind of aware that someone being evil and judgmental and then turning out to be evil and judgmental maybe had been done quite a few times. Yeah. So and if anything, that's like the most obvious thing in this is Bev. She's mean and horrible, and she carries on being mean and horrible. And we've seen that character loads and loads of times. So if anything, I'd say, even though I loved her death and everything, and I'm only picking holes here because I absolutely love it, but I'd say maybe that character's the weakest point, because she is exactly what you think she is.
Yeah. But she's so really in that, you know, we spend our lives on social media with people who seem to be exactly what she is.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's what I said before. She's real. She's the one that's actually scary because she's out there. So can we talk about then how sad the end is?
Oh, it's not sad. Not everyone dies.
I've watched it. I know, but I've watched it through twice, and both times when Riley's mum and dad, they start to sing and everyone starts joining in, both times that I've watched it, I've had to stop it and then watch those last 6 minutes the next day. She's like, can't do it. I had to do it both times.
You really feel like this is it taps into so many fears. I guess
emotional.
The fear of nuclear holocaust is there. just all there. It is
Yeah.
apocalypse. It is, oh shit. Oh shit. Like, it reminds me of Threads. Oh shit, they've actually done it. They've actually done it. And I guess that, along with Trump, is very in the air at the moment as well. They've actually done it.
Yeah.
We've just had to...
So did no one else cry at the end?
Oh, no.
Oh, that's all right. I just thought
I was
to check.
really
But same with
affected
Hill
by it.
House. That had me bawling all the way
think I did
through.
right.
Various different episodes made me cry, and same with this one. Those different episodes made me cry, and Flanagan just manages to, for me, to do the horror thing and to do the drama thing, but also to do I wouldn't say melodrama, so I don't think it is, but to do I'm crying again.
No, I had my
Thanks.
jaw on the floor.
Mike.
I mean, I was just like, oh my God, he's really doing
When the singing
really
stops
doing,
as the sun
he's
comes
really
up.
doing
It's
it.
like,
He's wiping out the community. And then, I mean, it says a lot that, the fact that, I mean, I think we said this in an email exchange, didn't we? That I can't feel my legs becomes a happy line.
Yeah. Oh, gee.
And
Oh my God. Don't say it.
I can't feel my legs, and we all go, yay, she's a little vampire.
Yay!
She's just a wheelchair user again. Brilliant.
Well, you know what?
That's worked
I've
out
not
for the best.
interpreted it as happy, actually, but of course, yeah.
No, it is. It means
she's.
yeah. Two of
She'll
them
survive.
are turning.
Yeah.
She's going to go on, and the sequel will be the two of them going to find out where that
Oh, God.
flying critter landed.
If only there were still direct-to-video movies, that would be a perfect
Streamer equivalent.
It's,
Midnight Mass 2.
Could happen. All right, guys.
Drink the Kool-Aid.
This has been wonderful. We've got a few minutes left. Are there any? Do we
Flavour
have
Aid.
any final thoughts that we'd like about this movie? I think we might just have had yours, Stella, because that was kind of pretty final.
It's too sad.
Don't cry.
I have to say, I didn't cry, but only because I'm weird and that.
You're dead
It's the
inside.
first thing in a long time I
Something.
wanted to really urge people to watch. I felt like I hadn't urged people to. You've got to watch that.
I have to say,
Yeah, I was the same.
we should say,
Everyone.
Ian, that the only reason we're doing this podcast is because you urged me to watch it, and I wouldn't have done it without what you said. So
Yeah.
hopefully,
It was quite hard to tell people you've got to watch this, and then you'd go, "I can't really tell you why."
yes.
I know you like. I can't say, but it's like because I
know
saw
you
somebody tell a friend of mine who loves horror, who's a massive Salem's Lot fan, just say you've got to watch Midnight Mass, and he was just like, no, it doesn't. It looks shit. It's on Netflix. I don't really like that kind of thing. He's like old school. They went, yeah, but you love Salem's Lot, and I was just like, what? So then he went and watched it because he knew it was about vampires. But it's like he'll never know what it was like to go in, not knowing.
Because that is a huge spoiler, isn't it? Because you don't know until probably 4 episodes in that there's a vampire in it.
That's where we are.
Yeah. And it can never and it should never end up on lists of best vampire things ever because it's spoiling it for people who haven't seen it. So so it's.
I'm gonna go and watch it again.
No, it is brilliant. No, I'm gonna watch it with my kids because they're just getting into. I'm having an amazing rewatch, if we please, Stella, of Walking Dead. I haven't watched Walking Dead.
Yay.
I think I've watched every episode of Walking Dead just once. I haven't missed one, but I don't think I've ever had a rewatch. And
I'm watching it with Vima as well.
And my son is binging it on his mobile. But when he's at mine, we've been watching it on actual TV, and we got through all the best bits of season 2. So I was there when he got to see what comes out of the barn. She's like one of the best bits in early Walking Dead, which we won't spoil for Dan because you haven't bothered watching it yet. Have you?
No, I have seen that far. I've not seen.
You have seen that far.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I've seen the first 5 seasons.
Yeah. But
so
anyway,
we're gonna have to wrap up in a sec. Kirsty, I think you're the only one who didn't throw in a final thought. Are you good?
Yeah, no, I'm good. I think that Hamish Linklater is my final thought.
Raoul's probably my final thought.
Okay, I'll throw a different but equally brief final thought. It's nice when you watch something and it teaches you something you didn't know. We talked about how coming from Catholic backgrounds, we knew a lot. Stella and I kind of recognised a lot in this, but I did not know the word Chasuble. which is what they call the priest frock. We call it a surplice. I don't know where they got that word from, but
Chasuble.
I don't know.
No,
I don't know.
That didn't stick in my head.
It just maybe because all the other details were so recognisable to me, that one just leapt out.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, again, it shows the site of meaning and all that, because I'm not Catholic and I didn't know much, but just seeing characters talking about why you're wearing the gold one instead of the green one, kind of pick up what's going on, and in your head you're not going, you're going, I hope he's not making this up. I hope this isn't actually bollocks. No, the Catholics are going, what is this shit?
The Catholics will come for you.
So I assume that's all correct.
What's amazing is that it does seem to be correct, and also, really well in service to the story. So, maybe in a couple of years when I've watched it again, we'll do another episode, and you guys have probably seen it 3 more times by then, and we can have even more thoughts.
Probably.
It's amazing.
Okay, everybody, we'll wrap up now then. Thank you so much.
Can we have a round of applause for managing to do
wow.
Yeah, we've done it. We've got to the end.
The world's not.
we haven't actually checked yet that all the recordings haven't.
Yes, it could still all go wrong.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's end it before something happens.
Thank you so much, everybody.
You have been listening to And Now the Podcast Starts. Produced and released by Ambidextrous Solutions Limited. Presented by Kirsty Warrow, T.D. Velasquez, Ian Winterton, and Stella Gaynor. Special thanks to Greg Hume for our original theme music, and to Brian Gorman for our original artwork. All dialogue and music clips from films, TV shows, and trailers are used for the purposes of criticism in the spirit of fair dealing as defined in UK law and fair use as defined in US law. No copyright infringement is intended. Please visit our home on the web, www.andnowpodcast.com, for more content and contact details. Or visit our Facebook pages at AndNowPod or at Lee Cushing Pod. Follow us on Twitter at AndNowPodcast or at Lee Cushing Podcast. If you'd like to donate to us, please visit patreon.com/AndNowPodcast. And now the podcast stops.